In this house, we drink Irish whiskey. In every house, we drink Irish whiskey. We only drink Irish whiskey. Welcome, everybody, to the Shebeen. It's Friday night. It used to be Sunday night. Now it's Friday. Sundays are forgotten. We are joined tonight, as we always are. I'm joined tonight by Lauren McMullen. Lauren, you're very welcome. How are you?
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Hope we're all well. I'm surprised we've remembered to say Happy Friday instead of Happy Sunday, in fairness, or something along the lines of that. We're doing well.
Happy Friday. You're very welcome. We are chatting all things Irish whiskey on the Shebeen tonight. We're focusing tonight on something special. Dream drams. If money was no object, what would we spend it on? We're going to dream big. We're going to dream bigger than our eyes, our stomachs, and our budgets. But sure, what cost is it to dream? Nothing at all. Nothing at all. We'd love to know what you're drinking, what's in your glass. What have you been, maybe you found interesting Irish whiskey during the week you'd like to tell us about. Let us know in the comments as always, and tell us where you're joining us from. So hello to Rick and Greg and David and Rich and so many familiar faces joining us. We're going to have a bit of crack tonight talking about the dreamiest of drams. The dreamiest of drams.
And we're not just stopping at dream whiskies. We're also diving a little bit further into experiences, what else you could do if money was no object in terms of casks and bars and everything along the lines of that. So we're not just stopping at whiskey. It's essentially, if money was no object, what in the world of Irish whiskey would you choose to do?
We had a great session last week on the 5 essential whiskies, Irish whiskies that every bar should have. Great debate, great discussion, much viewed, much shared video that did the rounds during the week. And it was a great discussion, and we love hearing your thoughts on what makes for a good whiskey for you at any price point. So like we did last week, most of the whiskeys last week were under $100. There won't be sight nor sound of a whiskey under $100 tonight, I don't think, will there?
No, this is 500 plus tonight, I think, ranging up into the thousands. So it'll be interesting. It's interesting to see actually the topics that really spark the debate and the chats and the conversations, either in the group in Irish Whiskey Fans of America or live on the chat here and afterwards after people have watched the replay. So yeah, as you said, Barry, there's a lot of discussion after last week. So interesting to see everyone's different opinions. So it'll be even more interesting, I think, this week to hear what people would do if you had an unlimited budget and what you would do with it.
Lauren, before we get into all of that chat, what have you been working on this week in the world of Irish whiskey?
So today is exactly 7 weeks until we begin our next whiskey bus adventure to Ireland's Wild West, to the Wild Atlantic Way. And a couple of weeks ago, I visited one of our stops on the bus on St. Patrick's Day, no less. So I paid a visit to Louise McGuan, of course, founder of JJ Corey, to finalize a couple of things, see where we were at, what needed kind of a little bit more discussion and what we were doing on that day on the whiskey bus. And let me tell you, we were blown away, weren't we? Just it's putting it out there. It's going to be very hard to top what Louise has planned for us that day. So many surprises, so many opportunities to really get hands-on with what it is to be a bonder. Not going to say too much because I want to keep it a surprise for the whiskey busters who are on board. Greg's the stop. Rick, I think there's still we could still squeeze you. We can still squeeze you on there.
We could squeeze Rick in.
We could, yeah, absolutely. And of course, we're not just stopping the fun and the crack at Louise's farm in her bonded warehouse. We are continuing the crack in a St. Patrick's Day parade on the back of a branded flatbed truck. We're all going to be in fancy dress. We're going to have the crack, a little bit of a cheeky pour of whiskey, maybe along the way, of course. And everybody's going to be in fancy dress. Louise has said there will be a very good prize for the winner and the best dressed. Myself and Barry and Anthony have already started to plan our St. Patrick's Day costumes, and you're in for a treat. Let's just say you're in for a treat. It was my idea. I'm going to take credit for this. And it'll be funny.
I'm dressing as Lauren. Lauren's dressing as Anthony. Anthony's dressing as no, we're not. That was a proposal.
Switching identities.
I need to move my heater. My heater's burning my legs. Give me 1 second here.
I usually have one by my side as well. We're still in the depths of winter. No doubt we'll be blown to bits on the Wild Atlantic Way in March as well, weather dependent. So yeah, really just at the minute, the focus is primarily, of course, on Whiskey Bus 3. We're more or less there anyway, but it's just tying up the last final little bits and pieces. I dropped a little note to our guests today, as those of you here with us tonight will know, to expect a few little luggage tags. We look after you before you reach Irish soil, of course, as well. And it's great. We're really excited for it. And of course, we also threw in a couple more surprises there as well for the Galway leg of our Whiskey Bus experience, which was Mickle and a Hascraw. And let me tell you, what we are doing at Mickle has never been done before. It's a completely unique experience. No one has ever done it before at Mickle or surrounding areas. And I can't wait to see your faces when we tell you when you get on the bus.
That'll be great.
There.
So you've been working on getting all those bits and pieces tied up for our guests.
Absolutely.
Excellent. I spent the day today at Clonakilty Distillery. I was sampling casks. Tough job, but I have to do it because if I don't, there'll be an awful thirst. And came back with 4 samples from 4 casks. And not only that, but also they're very smart because they gave me a bottle of reverse osmosis water, that deionized water. So I don't use tap water or distilled water, but rather deionized water to properly bring down the ABV and leave it settle for 24 hours before I sample some of these. So that's for future stories and sips bottling that we've got in the works. And I've also been working on our Redbreast tasting, which we've got coming up. We announced tonight. So if you're part of our Stories and Sips Whiskey Club, you might have seen announcement of our new kits, Stories and Sips Whiskey kits going out, and we'll be sending those out next week. So visit storiesandsips.com if you want to join our Redbreast tasting. So yeah, I was working on that. And then I was all week thinking about this, like how do we approach the dream drams and what's the kind of angle for this, which is it's different to how we approached last week, I think. Last week was kind of a bit easier because we'd have all of those whiskies, whereas tonight we might not have all those whiskies to hand, but we may have tried them all at some point or another.
Yes, tonight I only have one that is of my what my no budget, I guess, would be, that money no option choices. One I have tasted a couple of times, and the other, neither of us have tasted Barry on one of mine, but it's a very coveted pour, recently released dram, which we'll come on to, and one that we might taste, sure, later in the year.
If you're new to the Shebeen, this is very informal, just a chat between Lauren and myself every week about Irish whiskey. We share maybe a topic, a discussion point. We don't have all the answers. We don't know everything. We're not whiskey experts. We're enthusiasts, no different than yourselves. And we're all in different parts of our journey. So I know there's some people who are joining for the first time tonight. You're very welcome. All we ask is that you give the video now a like on YouTube and maybe subscribe to us on YouTube. That's it. Costs you nothing. And it helps us out dramatically and tremendously. So we're tonight going to talk about dream drams, and we wanted to think about whiskey in the terms of if money was no object. And that's not something we've done typically, or we've done really a whole lot of, because, well, money is an object, and we can't all live in the dream world where money is no object. But there was requests to go the other direction by some of our viewers last week, and we thought, you know what, let's roll the dice on that and see what we could do. And it's quite an exciting world that we can dream about. But we have to suspend reality, I think, for a bit while we're doing it, do we?
Yeah, I think so. But also, I said to you earlier, Barry, in brand plans and brand discussions when I used to work for Bushmills, we were always asked the question, if you had an unlimited budget, what would you like to do? And it was so interesting to see how people's brains worked and what they would like to do if there just was a limit or an unlimited amount of money available, because everything you dream of can be scaled back to something that suits your budget and is a little bit more realistic. So it'll be interesting, I think, the latter half of tonight, when we're talking about different things you could do with your money, what people might come up with. I'm intrigued.
And we want of you tonight, our request is that you also suspend reality if the reality is not that you have unlimited funds or budget to spend on whiskey. And if you do, share with us. You don't have to tell us that you're that person, but you can share with us what you would like to do or what you are doing on the extreme wild side, the super premium, the things you can do when you have unlimited budget, or if money was no object. I was first introduced to the notion that there are people out there for whom money is no object that love Irish whiskey. Probably about 10 years ago, when I met a man who drank he drank Middleton Very Rare as his daily drinker. Every day he'd have a drop of Middleton Very Rare, and I couldn't believe it. I had never met somebody like that. I'd never heard that such a person could exist in the world, that they would have this much money that they could drink Middleton Very Rare every single day of the week. And then you get into the world of Irish whiskey and you meet some lunatics of people who drink far more elaborate whiskies than that as well, and are some of the nicest people in the world. But it is a bit of a slippery slope when you get into the world of whiskey, because as your budget goes up, you find yourself using that budget for whiskies that you would have previously said, I will never spend that amount of money on a whiskey.
I think that's happened a lot within the community that we have with Irish Whiskey Fans of America and wider, is before they discovered you, Barry, or before they were introduced into the group, that was a very real reality. Like, no, I would never spend more than $50 on a whiskey. Now look at us all. we're all sucked in.
And we want to know from you tonight, what would your dream whiskey be as well, if money was no object? Is there something that you've got your eye on, you've seen mentioned, or you'd love to try someday, or you tried it once and you couldn't imagine ever being able to afford a bottle? What would be your dream dram that you could get that bottle if money was no object, and put it on your shelf and admire it and cry a little bit and stroke it every day and just kind of give it a rub and a kiss and blow it a kiss from across the room? What's your dream dram? We're going to share some of ours that we've encountered. We've been very fortunate. I know, Lauren, you have been very fortunate to taste some extraordinary whiskies in your whiskey career, and I'm the same. And we don't take that privilege lightly, and it's something we cherish. And we're very, we always want to share when we have a whiskey like that to share. We'll always want to do it and make sure somebody else can try it as well. So when we're talking about some of these whiskeys that we've tried, please don't for a second think these are whiskeys that we just pull off the shelf every day.
No,
we don't. And nor do we look at these whiskeys and immediately look down on any other whiskey or anybody's choice at any price point. I hope you agree that we are the most open-minded when it comes to whiskey, right?
Absolutely. So 2 points on what you've just said there. I think I said this to you earlier in the week, Barry, because I obviously worked for a brand that has very, very old whiskey in its warehouses. There did come a point that I did almost start to take it for granted when you were handed a 30-plus-year-old whiskey. And then when you take a step back and you kind of come out of that and think, hold on a second, this is a 30-plus-year-old whiskey, and the reality kind of set in exactly what you were drinking. We talked last week about whiskeys being a time capsule and really sort of marking a certain point in time when it was distilled, for example. And the second thing is, absolutely, we do not judge anyone for what their favorite pour is or what they drink on a daily basis. I'm very open, and I said last week, Pars Rye, 30 euro plus whiskey, is probably one of my favorite pours of all time, and I will drink that more than I will drink any of the whiskeys that we mentioned tonight. So we're very open. We're an open book.
If we could wear a special hat tonight, we would. That would remind you that we're talking under the kind of the shade of if money was no object, and it's not normally us, it's like put on this hat just to talk about these things, but this is if money was no object. And so we'll talk about those whiskies. And a couple of comments there that have come in. Bill had a question: is it just me, or is 20-year-old plus Irish whiskey much more expensive than its Scotch counterpart? The answer is yes, it is, and there's a very good reason for it, Bill. There's only 3 distilleries on the island of Ireland that can give you a 20-year-old whiskey. There's 30 plus in Scotland that can do it. And so availability, exclusivity, rarity are all driving up the price of anything over 20 years. And 20 years is a great number, actually, that you've come out with there, because anything that's 21 years old and above, you're absolutely seeing astronomical prices compared to our Scotch friends. Okay.
Very true.
All right. So yeah, so feel free to throw in your ideas, throw in your suggestions here as we go, and we'll dive into a few. We'll start off with a few dream drams, right? And then we'll talk about some scenarios if we had a pocket full of money. So for tonight, Lauren, we won the lottery. Congratulations! It was a great win. The
Very
Powerball.
lucky. Yep, absolutely. We're millionaires now.
We took the lump sum. We said we're not getting the annuity. We want the lump sum now to spend the money.
And we're spending it well. I think we're spending it well.
For each of these whiskies that we're going to talk about, we probably have a little story to go with it or a little connection like we did last week with 30 euro whiskies. So anyway, we'll crack straight into it and Lauren's going to get us started.
Absolutely. So we're very much doing this like we did last week. Kind of, I'll pick a whiskey, Barry will pick a whiskey, and we'll discuss it. So my first money isn't a problem. Dram would be one of my favorite whiskies of all time, and I've said this numerous occasions on the Shebeen and lock-ins previously, I think as well, or just mentioned in the group, is the Method and Madness 33-year Mizunara Oak Cask. The first time I tried this whiskey was round about a year ago, actually. I think it's quite literally a year next week. Was in the Dead Rabbit in New York with yourself, Barry, and Jared Garland at the time. He was there, wasn't he? He was, yeah. As part of the Dead Rabbit's 10th anniversary. And you were saying earlier, Barry, only 12 bottles of this whiskey actually made it to the US, and the Dead Rabbit had one of them. So really special occasion. There was only 252, I think it was, bottles of this whiskey produced. So very, very limited edition. And it comes in at a lovely €3,000, about $3,200 price point. So this is a 33-year-old whiskey, of course, pot still whiskey, that spent 30 years, the first 30 years aging in ex-bourbon casks, and then the final 3 years aging in Mizunara oak cask, so, or often called Japanese Mizunara. So it's a species, an oak variety, widely distributed in Northeast Asia, and it's known for contributing a lovely interplay of a flavor to a whiskey. So that sweet, spicy flavor. And when I tasted this whiskey, I think my jaw quite literally hit the floor. It was one of those moments that you'll remember forever when you taste a whiskey that really leaves an impact on you. And nice, healthy 52.8% ABV as well. So it packs a punch, so much flavor, really unique kind of sandalwood note coming in there. Lots of vanilla as well. Just a stunning, stunning whiskey. One of my favorites ever. So that's why it had to be first.
Stunning, beautiful whiskey. The most delicate of whiskeys I think I've ever tried. We're used to whiskeys of that age being perhaps heavily fortified wine, sherry, port. Where a lot of those will feature tonight. But this one has we sleep sometimes on bourbon. Like bourbon, lengthy periods of aging for pot still whiskeys and bourbon brings out the most beautiful fruit notes. And then the sandalwood is a great note you shared there for this. It's an absolutely stunning, fragrant and delicate whiskey that just dances in your tongue. And it is a special whiskey. It has had mixed reviews because of the cost from people, but we're not even counting the cost because we won the lottery yesterday. So we're just talking about this because we love it.
That doesn't matter. I actually had this exact conversation with someone during the week about how underrated lengthy periods of maturation in ex-bourbon casks are, whether it be pot still, as you said, or single malt. It just brings out the most beautiful flavors, but as you said, not something that overpowers you or knocks your socks off. It is unbelievable, but you still really get that beautiful sort of character from the Mizunara oak. It's just an amazing whiskey, beautiful presentation as well, right up there with one of my favorites. And of course, Method and Madness Gariana featured last week in one of my kind of must-have pours. So we've got both ends of the kind of spectrum here, where you've got the really kind of more expensive side of things and the really sort of value for money pours.
Lauren's going to be getting checks from Method and Madness team next week for all of her flying the flag for M&M here, no doubt about it.
Free marketing.
You'll start to notice a trend here, folks, that while the whiskies we'll talk about are all old and they all pretty much come from the same couple of distilleries, it's not that the best whiskeys, that the oldest whiskeys are the best whiskeys. It's just that the best whiskeys we've happened to have tasted happen to have been of a certain age and from a certain couple of distilleries.
But as you said, Barry, there's only 3 distilleries that 20-plus-year-old whiskies can actually come from, and a lot of the older sourced liquids that you see on the market from other brands is either Bushmills or Cooley. So
That's right.
it features, it's kind of, it figures that these two, Middleton Distillery and Bushmills, are heavily featured in this lineup.
My first choice for a dream dram happens to be the number one whiskey that I've ever tried, have ever tried, maybe will ever try, and it's the 32-year-old Dream Cask from Redbreast. It was released about 6 years ago. There were 800 and something bottles. So look, I have one here that we can look at, but it was this is the first bottle I ever saved up for. It was out of my, I'd never spent what I'd spent on it at the time on any whiskey. It has since gone 4 times what I had spent on it on auctions. If you want to find one of these now, you'll have to spend about 3,000 or 4,000 euros on a bottle. 816 bottles were released. This was a unique project. For World Whiskey Day in 2017, Billy Lighton, master blender at the time in Middleton Distillery, was challenged to come up with one of his perhaps favorite whiskeys that he could find in the warehouses and do a little tasting for whiskey bloggers and influencers at the time. I wasn't one of them. I was just getting into whiskey at the time, and I remember hearing about this. But they had this back in 1985. Billy Lighton laid down the first ever batch of whiskies that would become Redbreast 21. So in 1985, they laid down barrels of pot still whiskey, Middleton pot still whiskey, in ex-bourbon barrels and ex-Oloroso sherry casks. And they let them mature for, of course, a minimum of 21 years. But 31 years later, Billy realized there was still some of that whiskey left over from that first laying down. It had spent, I believe, it had spent 26 years in bourbon and then 5 years in a first fill Oloroso sherry cask. And when himself and Dave McCabe, the assistant blender at the time, tried it, they thought this was spectacular. It was 31 years of age. They sent out little samples to a ton of bloggers around Ireland and the UK, and the response was so great that the following year they released it as the Dream Cask, one single cask that represented the best thing that Billy Lighton thought existed as a Redbreast in Middleton Distillery. And at the time it was released, it was about 500 euros when it was released. And it took, I think, almost a full day to sell out. I know people who bought 20 of these bottles. They thought it was such good value at the time. It has now gone up to about 3,000 or 4,000 in auction. It happens to be the most luxurious, balanced, rounded whiskey I've ever tried in my life. I don't know that I'll ever try something like it again. And it'll take a lot for me to crack this one open, but it's an unbelievable whiskey. And it's my number one. I've never tried anything like it. And I can't even imagine what would have to come out to knock it off its perch. I don't know if anybody in the audience has tried that one.
You just answered the question I was about to ask you. I was about to say, is that an unopened bottle? But it is.
This one's unopened, yeah. So, I was lucky enough to come across, to meet somebody who was selling their bottle privately. So I had one that I drank, and then I have one that I've kept here. I gave the empty bottle to somebody to turn it into a lamp, and they put the drill into it, and they shattered the whole bottle to pieces as they were making their lamp. So that's disappeared. No. But we have a full one here anyway.
Oh no, that's awful. That would have been such a nice kind of momentum to have, wouldn't it?
No. So staggering whiskey. The Dream Cask collection has gone on every year since then. They have released, Redbreast has released a Dream Cask ranging in age from 20 years all the way up to the 32. That was the oldest one they've ever released. I don't know that it's a collection that's going to go on forever. I suspect we'll see an end to it. It won't be like Middleton, very rare, but it is a series for a period of time where there was one every year, and it is highly sought after. It's now a lottery system to be able to win a chance to buy it every year.
Won't be too long, I guess, until the next one comes out. It's usually around sort of May time, isn't it?
That's right, yeah, around World Whiskey Day. Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
Over to me. So this is, now it's not every Friday night in the middle of January that you crack something like this, but I felt like, seeing as I was putting it in here tonight and it was one of my choices, I thought I would. So that's what I've been sneakily sipping on for the past sort of 25, 30 minutes or so. is, of course, Redbreast 27. And I have no doubt that I'll have a lot of people agree with me on this one. It is the oldest permanent expression of the Redbreast core range. And I'm actually going to contradict myself quite a bit here, because even though it is a dream whiskey, another one of my favorites, blown away the first time I tasted it a number of years ago, I actually think for a 27-year-old single pot still whiskey, it is incredible value. You can pick up a bottle of this for about €500. So what would it be, by about $600 plus, probably, I'd imagine.
It varies now. The price has gone crazy, because up to about $1,200 in the US.
Can imagine. Yeah. So this whiskey is matured in a phenomenal combination of ex-bourbon, ex-sherry, and ex-ruby port casks. And even though 27 years is, of course, the age in the bottle, bear in mind that's always the age of the youngest whiskey in that bottle. So the oldest whiskey in here is about 32, 33 years old. It is just, there are no words that I can use to describe this whiskey. It is just unbelievable. I've been sipping it here, and it's almost like the beautiful candied orange citrus, walnuts, toasted oak, plums, figs. It is just the most unbelievably rounded whiskey ever, despite the fact that it is a healthy 53.6% ABV as well. I'm blown away with it, and it's one of my favorite whiskeys ever. So this would
Great
be,
choice.
I would say this would be my daily sipper. I think if now we're millionaires, I think this would be my daily sipper.
Thankfully, we won the lottery, so we can make that happen.
We're right.
It's you're absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. It is a great value whiskey for being the age it is, and it being permanently available. And that this is one of the few whiskeys we'll talk about tonight that you can get a batch of this permanently. It's always there, and it also represents a fantastic story in the evolution of the wood program at Middleton Distillery. So back in the late 1980s, Billy Lighton's boss at the time would have gone to Portugal looking for rare casks that weren't typically used in Middleton Distillery, and knocked on the doors of port houses, some of whom would probably have laughed at him and said, why do we want to get involved in Irish whiskey? But eventually Sandyman Port did acquiesce and agree to sell export casks to Middleton Distillery, and started a long relationship as they developed with other providers as well. But you now see port turning up in dream casks. You see it turning up in a number of Redbreast expressions that are Middleton expressions. But Redbreast 27 is the real showcase for what you can do with port, bourbon, and sherry.
And to have a 27-year-old whiskey in your core range is not something to shy away from. That's incredible. And as I said, €500 a bottle for a 27-year-old whiskey, it's very, very hard to beat. And let's not shy away from just how unbelievably stunning the bottle is, and the case is, the wooden case. It's such an eye catcher, such a stunning whiskey. 10 out of 10 for me.
For those who want to get this cheaper than the $1,100 or $1,200 you're seeing it for in your area, keep an eye on the whiskey auctions. Like Irish whiskey auctions kicked off tonight. I have picked up Redbreast 27 on Irish whiskey auctions for less than retail. I've picked up a bottle for €390, €440, less than retail. So there's people who need to offload whiskeys. They'll not set a reserve. Keep an eye on it. You might be surprised how affordable. Again, this is a subjective thing, of course. You can get Redbreast 27, but if you're in the market for Redbreast 27, you know that's the price point. Why not spend $400 instead of $1,100 if you can?
Absolutely. Greg has just said that it pairs wonderfully with the dark chocolate. I love whiskey and chocolate, but I actually haven't done it with Redbreast 27. And there's dark chocolate in the cupboard behind me. I might do that later.
That's a great idea, actually. I have a little bit of intense dark Tesco's finest, rich and luxurious here. Might have to crack that open. I might in a minute, yeah. For my next whiskey, maybe I will pair it.
When you're talking about your next whiskey, I'm going to get it. Greg's put the notion in my head.
All right, I'm going to talk about my next whiskey, which is part of my dream drams. Go get your chocolate if you like. Folks, this is an unusual whiskey. It's a rare whiskey. It's something that came and went, and we might never see anything like it again. But I consistently hold it up in maybe second or third place for of all time of the whiskies I've ever had the privilege of trying. It's Green Spot 26-year-old. And it was a single cask release for the Whiskey Exchange in London. And the Whiskey Exchange are going to feature a couple of times tonight because they are absolutely fantastic at selecting casks. They have a fantastic relationship with Middleton Distillery, and they've released some exclusive Redbreasts, Method of Madness, spot whiskies over the years, yellow spots as well as green spots. And they have a fantastic buying team and tasting team there that know what they're doing. This is a very unusual whiskey. Okay, we have a bottle of it here. Purely for show, you understand. This was distilled in 1991 by, at the time, it would have been Barry Crockett, would have been the master distiller at the time. It is a green spot that was aged in bourbon and sherry casks, and then it was recast into Marsala. So the bourbon and the sherry components were married together, and then that was recast into Marsala. Now, that's a very unusual approach to the spot whiskies because that is kind of a finishing, and you don't typically see a finishing on higher end spot whiskies. You see it on the wine series of the Wine Geese series of green spots, but you don't see it at this high end. This is a 26-year-old green spot. You might say, well, that doesn't make sense. There's no such thing as a 26-year-old green spot. And I agree. It doesn't kind of fit the brand, but I don't think there was anywhere else for it to go in the brands within Middleton. Like, what else could be a bourbon, sherry, and Marsala aged pot still? It doesn't fit Redbreast, really. It doesn't fit Middleton Very Rare. It doesn't fit anything else. So it became a spot whiskey. So presumably they tried a cask of something and they said, this is unbelievable. We want this. And then they kind of shoehorned it in to be a spot whiskey. It's one of the most complex whiskies and layered whiskies that I've ever had in my life. And when it was released, it was about £500 when it was released first. And as many shops do, they will release a first batch of the whiskey, and then miraculously it'll sell out very quickly, and everyone will be upset, and there'll be all kinds of chatter online. And then, oh, lo and behold, another pallet is found, and now it's £1,500. And that's what happened now. So you can actually still get this at the Whiskey Exchange in London, but it'll cost you £1,500, which is a lot of money. But if you're millionaires like Lauren who just won the lottery, you can do that.
Doesn't matter. I have never, unfortunately, tasted this one, but if it's Marsala in there, I'm going to love it. One of my other favorite whiskies of all time, as I've mentioned before, is the Bushmills 1995 Marsala cask.
Yes.
Part of the Causeway collection. I love Marsala cask finishes, love them so much. So I would say that would have been a winner in my book as well.
This will be opened. Like, this is not going anywhere except to be open. So when it does get opened, Lauren, you will be trying it. There's a lovely story to this, not this bottle particularly, but we had another bottle that a few of us got together on and donated to a charity event for the tasting. And I remember introducing this whiskey and telling the crowd that this was distilled in 1991. And a girl in the audience said, "Oh, I was born in 1991." And I thought, okay, that's funny. I said, "What month?" And she said, "October." And I said, "What day?" And she said, "The 18th." I said, "This was distilled on the 18th of October, 1991. She nearly fell off her seat. So she went home with the empty bottle to mark her birthday because it was distilled on her birthday, which is amazing.
What are the chances of that ever happening? That's amazing. That's like once in a lifetime bottle. That's unbelievable. I know.
This sat on the shelf with the Whiskey Exchange for more than a year at £500, though. I think this one didn't sell out very quickly. Others did, but once that first batch went, they did increase the price to £1,500. But it did sit for a while. Like, people were surprised it sat there. So I remember saving up my money for a second one to get that when I realized how good it was. And if you look back through some old Instagram posts, you'll see I've shared tasting notes on that because I open that and I drink it. But anyway, that's one of my dream drams. If money's no object, I drink that forever. Maybe even over Redbreast 27.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a bold claim. Fair enough.
I know.
Did you get some chocolate?
Oh yeah, I have chocolate here.
Do you have 27 on hand?
I don't have 27, but I've got 30-year-old. Does that? We're awful. We don't live like this, folks. We don't live like this. No, we
really don't. Like, I would never usually whip open or pour a glass of Redbreast 27 on the 26th of January.
Greg is mentioning a great whiskey that I had completely forgotten about. That, you know what, could be a contender here. Staying with some Jameson, having the 15 pure pot still. It's here somewhere. but this is is there. The 15-year-old, released in the millennium, released 1999. Pot's the last ever Jameson at the until 2 years ago. That was a pot still whiskey, 15 years of age, and they couldn't sell it at the time. If you bought two, they gave you a third one free. That was how tough it was to sell it back in the 1999, 2000. Staggeringly good whiskey. Maybe some of the best pot still to come out of Middleton. Unbelievably orchard fruit, so bright, so yet so luxurious and velvety at the same time, and an amazing mouthfeel, a coating on the tongue that's just like no other. How's that chocolate going?
Greg, thank you for this. That is unbelievable. Unbelievable. I always take a sip of whiskey, have the bit of chocolate or cheese or whatever I'm pairing with the whiskey, and then go back for a sip. Completely changes it. That is unbelievable.
Right, I'm gonna follow that route as well.
It's really brought out the nuttiness of the whiskey. Oh wow.
Folks, if you've just joined us, we are talking about dream drams and what we would do if money was no object. We are not just sitting here being pretentious, drinking expensive whiskeys and eating chocolate and quaffing on about this, that, and the other thing. We don't live like this normally, but we're doing the hard work today. A day in a distillery sampling casks, and then a night eating chocolate and drinking 30-year-old whiskey.
Listen, January is a long month. We're on January 46th. It's been a long, dark month.
It's been a long, moist month.
Long, moist month. Terrible month. There's been snow. There's been wind, rain, everything. I think we deserve it. January's long enough.
You deserve it, Lauren, and you must tell me that I deserve it.
Yeah, absolutely. We both deserve it.
Okay. All right. Let me see. You are up next, Lauren.
I am.
Oh.
Okay, let me give a little bit of a backstory to this. Barry judged me for this during the week, but I'm rolling with it. So I have not tasted this exact whiskey, the Bushmills 44-year-old, which is of course a Dubai duty-free exclusive. There's been a lot of noise about it recently. It was only released before Christmas, the week before Christmas. I have not tasted this physically directly from that bottle. However, I was very, very lucky to, not last year, but the year before, taste a version of this in Alex Thomas's office in the distillery. So I have a sense of what this is like. And
such a name dropper.
She's a lady, we all know, a great friend of mine. And this was something else. Now, this is a 12,000 euro single malt whiskey, which has been aged for the full 44 years in ex-Oloroso sherry casks. So Oloroso sherry casks, as we all know, play a massive part in many distilleries' maturation, but specifically in Bushmills. And if anyone has seen photos of this online, the color of this is insane. I genuinely do not think I have ever seen a whiskey that dark. It's like coffee. It's like a Doc Marten leather boot. It is just it's so unbelievable. And it's, as I said, it's released exclusively to Dubai duty free. And there was only 40 bottles released as well. So really limited quantities, very, very exclusive. And this would be right up there if I was a millionaire, which I am for tonight. This was a choice of mine.
Anything else you'd like to talk about with this?
Well, I mentioned earlier that we may or may not be opening a bottle of this later in the year. So in September, before our whiskey bus kicks off, the Northern Whiskey Lights whiskey bus kicks off, we have secured Alex herself, Bushmills Master Blender, for a private exclusive tasting in Belfast in the Friend at Hand on Hill Street. Hill Street, as I talked about before, has a real significance to the Bushmills brand. It was once home to the headquarters of the brand, a bonded warehouse and a bottling plant, all associated with Bushmills. And we've secured Alex for a private tasting in the Friend at Hand, where we are celebrating 100 years of Bushmills single malt whiskies. So we'll be opening this. We'll be opening the 25-year-old malt and the 31-year-old malt, which totals, of course, 100 years, and having a private dinner with her afterwards in Waterman House, which was where the old warehouse was. And I'm very excited for it. It's going to be very limited, a very exclusive event, but we're going to do it because whiskey should be enjoyed, it's not there to sit in a bottle, and I think we should open it, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Now, before anybody accuses us of getting some unbelievable freebies, we bought this bottle. We went and procured it ourselves. Irish Whiskey Experiences has acquired this bottle at retail price, like anybody else will have to pay, because we want to open it. Because, and I've done something similar with Silent Distillery bottles in the past, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. We want people to we want people to taste amazing whiskey. So some of these will be bought and sold on auction, and they'll sit on shelves, and they'll be dusted down every year and passed down from generation to generation. We're going to open this and drink it, which is important.
Lloyd, 100%. If you stick a Bushmills under my nose, I will pinpoint what it is. It happened in Belfast. Remember, Barry, you and Anthony ordered a Black Bush, and you just put it to me, and I was like, that's Black Bush. It's too many years of putting it under my nose to not know.
There's a DNA, all right. There's a DNA.
Oh, there is. Absolutely.
So that's spectacular, and the oldest of the dream drams that we'll mention tonight as well, and not only the oldest from Bushmills.
Oldest ever released from Bushmills as well. So a real pinnacle of their single malt whiskies.
Outstanding. Sticking with Bushmills, and again, it's not because of the age, it's not because it comes from Bushmills or just comes from Middleton. It just happens to be that in the canon of whiskies we've tried, these stand out as being just extraordinary. For me, the 32-year-old Bushmills is top 5 whiskies of all time for me. I adore port casks. This is an all port cask, 32 years in a port cask, which is unbelievable, a port pipe. It is an extraordinary whiskey, and it is tied to a story because I tasted this for the first time in Bushmills for our lock-in event, Meet the Maker event that we hosted. One of our first ever Meet the Maker events for our whiskey club 2.5 years ago.
2 years ago this month.
2 years ago in January, when I met Lauren for the first time. I met Alex for the first time, and we opened this. Many of you were on that live stream as we opened it. And we got to try this, and it just brings back amazing memories of a fantastic evening and a great night with great friendships made. But every time I sip on this, and I look out for it on auctions, I look out for it because it was released exclusively for Le Maison du Whisky in France, which is a whiskey shop and distributor in France. Great friends to Irish whiskey, great friends to Bushmills and to Middleton. I look out for an auction because it can come up occasionally below retail price. I think the retail price is about €1,000 or 1,200 euros a bottle, but sometimes you can get it cheaper than that. Any sip of that will transport me back to that great night in Bushmills. Even just the smell of it, the nose, and I'm there. And you tasted that night as well.
I did. Are we allowed to tell the story of that now, or is that just hidden forever? No.
For Alex's sake,
that's between us two and Alex. That night was interesting. How we consumed this whiskey. That was actually the first night you saw the Causeway Distillery. No cameras, no phones. We left everything and we went inside the Causeway Distillery. That was your first time seeing it before it officially opened a year later.
When our live stream ended, it was about 2:00 in the morning, and Alex turned to the two of us and she said, "I want to show you my new distillery. Leave your phone there." And we walked to the new distillery, and we were there till about 6 in the morning getting the tour of the new distillery. Nobody had ever seen it. Nobody could talk about it. We didn't take any photographs, nothing. It would be another 18 months before anybody could kind of get proper wind of it. But this whiskey is tied to all that for me that night.
Yeah,
Greg's just wondering there how it compares to the 33 port. Greg, I've had the two of them, but not together, so I can't compare them. I will at some point sit down with the two of them, but I don't have any 32 left. I finished that bottle recently, and I have a 33 that's not opened. So at some point, the stars will align and they'll both be in the same room. And I'll say, I can't take it with me. And I'll open the two of them and we'll try them.
It is an absolutely stunning whiskey, and for those of you who are big fans of the Bushmills 16 year, which is finished in port casks, and you know how much of a flavour that it has, it really packs that beautiful, rich sort of dark fruit notes due to the influence of the port. Just think about that times 100, and you have the 32 year. It's an incredible whiskey. Big fan. It is also up there with me, but
you can
yeah.
share this one, so I'll allow you to share the stage with this one.
I think we did, myself and Paul and you open it in the live stream in March after Cork Whiskey Fest. I think we opened this.
We may have, yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah, we did. He wanted the Jameson Orange, but we pushed him towards this instead.
Yeah.
You had 3 selections for tonight that you kind of honed in on. I had 4, so I've got one more here. Now, we could go on and find more Dream Drams. We want to talk about more than just what are the Dream Drams. These just have to be really special whiskies that have a place in our hearts. We think they're value, but it's so subjective. Now that we're millionaires after winning the lottery yesterday, which was fantastic, the Powerball, 80 million. Lauren's going to be driving to work in her new Bugatti. It's these are whiskeys that we can drink every day, right?
You keep saying things when I have a mouthful of Redbreast 27.
I time it perfectly.
Perfect timing. Yeah. Oh yeah.
My last whiskey here that we'll talk about tonight, apart from those that we can give honorable mentions to, is a Redbreast, and it's a 30-year-old Redbreast, and it's one that I'm sipping on tonight, and it's I'm having it with a dark chocolate now, thanks to recommendations from Greg. This is another whiskey exchange shop in London selection. They selected a cask that spent 6 years in a bourbon barrel. Now, this is a very unusual maturation. 6 years in a bourbon barrel, and then 24 years in a port pipe. Now, normally you'd have the shorter maturation or finish at the end, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
This is like the Method of Madness 28-year-old. So there's people who will hold up Method of Madness 28-year-old as being one of their greatest whiskeys of all time. This is the same whiskey, but it's 2 years older and was a third of the price. So when this came out, it was £600 a bottle. When Method of Madness came out, it was, I think, £1,800 or €1,800 a bottle. This is an extraordinary whiskey. It's one of my top 5 whiskeys of all time. When I tried it, I took other bottles that I had full and I sent them to auction so that I could free up cash to try and buy more of these, because I wanted to know that I'd have one on standby. I told friends of mine who are big whiskey drinkers about it. Within 24 hours, there was about 50 bottles of this were purchased by people I knew who were going out on a limb to buy it. I said, you will not find a 30-year-old whiskey like this at this price ever again. I'm telling you, you have to buy it. And I think those people who did buy it were delighted that they did. It comes up at auction every now and again, but it goes up to 1,000, 1,200, 1,500 euros a bottle. If you ever get a chance to try it, it is like somebody squeezed plums and blackcurrant wine gums into your mouth. It is an extraordinary whiskey, and it is just all of the hallmarks of Redbreast. You got that fortified wine component, that small little bit of bourbon component, but that port pipe, those wonderful both dry and sweet notes coming through are out of this world. It's one of those whiskeys, when you sip it, you smile, and you don't know why you're smiling. You have to remember, oh, it's because I just sipped that whiskey. That's why I'm smiling. It's just involuntary. And that's my last Dream Dram selection for tonight.
Again, the original price, 600 for a 30-year-old whiskey, is not bad at all. That's very, very reasonable. It's a great price.
And the word reasonable, of course, is so subjective. And again, I'm going to keep saying this.
It is.
If you were to talk to somebody not in the whiskey world, or a friend who doesn't drink whiskey, and you said, yeah, I just spent £500 in a bottle of whiskey or dollars, they'll collapse in front of you. You'll be needing a defibrillator, and for good reason. Like we have to cop ourselves on sometimes and catch ourselves.
I know. I actually think you mentioned there about your top 5 whiskies of all time. I don't think mine have changed since I last declared them, which I remember someone asked me the question when myself and Paul were in your house on the live stream last March. I don't think mine have changed. I'm just trying to think. Yeah, my top 5 of all time, on because you were talking about honorable mentions, because I think there's a few that I want to mention in there that are not, for what they are, they're not extortionately priced, but they just didn't make the selection because we'd be here all night. So my top 5, Barry, I want to hear yours after this as well. So my top 5 are Redbreast 27, Method of Madness 33, Bushmills 1995 Marsala, Blue Spot, and Bushmills 2008 Muscatel. Hasn't changed since last March. I just remembered that. Now, speaking of us grounding ourselves and being reasonable with what we drink every day, Pars Rye is actually not slowly, it's very quickly coming up there. That whiskey has a chokehold on me. I love it. I think I've said this 500 times now, but that's my 5. Go.
That's great. That's really interesting. And these would be my top 4 really that I've shared. Redbreast 30, 32, Green Spot 26-year-old, and what else did I share?
30 Bushmills 32.
Bushmills 32. And then I had a controversial share last year where I shared that Killowen 3-year-old Tawny Port, Peated Tawny Port, would make my top 10, a 3-year-old whiskey. And I'll stand over that. It's just, it's about flavor. It just so happens that there's been this big gap because we haven't had distilleries producing the flavor we want up until the last few years. And so we've had to wait for this like really aged stuff to find the flavors that truly knock our socks off. But now you can find it at 3 and 4 years of age. I can tell you, having sampled some 4-year-old whiskey today, the future's bright for Irish whiskey at 3 and 4 years of age. I can tell you, we don't need to go to 30 and 40 years.
Brandon, I think what he's doing with Killowen is testament to that as well. He's kind of pushing the boundaries of what we always believed, that you had to have the older aged whiskies and older expressions to really get the full impact from the cask and the full flavor profile. But he's turning it on its head, and we love to see that. We like to be challenged with what we've known and believed for 10 plus years.
Matt wants to know, how do I convince my wife what's reasonable? This is a great question, Matt. And might I suggest that you reach out to us for a fabricated invoice that we can send you for things you purchase, and we'll send you a reduced invoice, all official looking. Rick has a question there. Lauren, you might answer it first. If you could pick one whiskey that you've tasted, wave a wand, and have a room full of it, which would it be?
That's so hard. That's genuinely like picking your favorite child. 5 is hard enough to limit it down to 5 with all the incredible whiskies we're so lucky to taste. One whiskey. Oh my word. Oh, I'd have to sit on that one for a while. I don't know. Do you have one?
I do, 30, yeah.
26? Oh,
Redbreast 32.
Yeah.
I honestly, it's beyond words. It's beyond words what this whiskey is like. But it does lead us on to another question, which is, so what changes when money's no object? Because isn't part of the enjoyment of whiskey the chance to try something you've never tried because somebody was kind enough to share a bottle with you, or you were lucky enough to go to a tasting where you got 10 milliliters of something special? Isn't that what's special too?
Yeah, exactly. We say this all the time, and we've mentioned it tonight again as well. Whiskey is often not just about the liquid in the glass. It's who you taste it with, where you taste it, the moment. And often that's what it pulls you back to when you have a sip of whiskey, is the moment you tasted it, who you were with, where was it? Was it a new city? Was it in a friend's house? Was it a special occasion? It's so much more than just the liquid. So I think there's a lot to be weighed up, really.
Where does that put it then with you? Like, in terms of, if we could have whiskey of any quality, any price point, any time, do you change how you drink whiskey on a regular day? Or do you always have the best and hope better comes?
That's a great question. And it's hard to answer, because I said earlier, I would probably make the Redbreast 27 my daily sipper.
Yeah.
I would change it, possibly. But then
Yeah.
would I really? Would I still reach for the Powers Rye and the Black Bushes of this world? Would I still go for the Old Faithfuls because they're great and they're versatile and you can enjoy them in so many ways? I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting. I think I tend to stick to what I wanted in the moment, and that's the honest truth. Just whatever I felt like.
I'm curious how you decided. So we all have days, nights when we say, "Do you know what? I'd like a whiskey." But
Yeah.
I don't always say, "Oh, I'd like a Powers John's Lane." So what I would have to do is I come up to the whiskey room and I'll look around and I'll just think and I'll pull something off. Oh, actually, yeah, I haven't had that in a while. Like, what's your process for choosing a whiskey when you
Yeah.
want a whiskey?
I do exactly the same as you. I have to visualize the whiskey, and I think it's whatever in that moment that I think, yeah, that's what I want to drink tonight. That's what I'll pull. It's the same happens in a bar, and sometimes more choice. That's a good point, actually. Sometimes the more choice you have, the harder it is to make a decision, because you know what it's like when you walk into a whiskey bar, 400 plus whiskeys, you're kind of a bit dumbfounded, like, oh, what am I going to try? Do I stick to an Old Faithful? Do I pick something I haven't tried before? I honestly think it's whatever I see, whatever my eyes fix on, and I'm like, that's what I'm having tonight. And I don't think that would change regardless of my bank balance.
But I would suggest that your choice will change and will continue to change because, or how you choose, because what will happen is now that you've got Redbreast 27 on your shelf,
Hmm.
and you've got, because I can see them behind you, you've got some nice Method and Madnesses, you've got, so you will now be less likely, I would argue, to go to a Jameson original, a White Bush,
Yeah.
a Tullamore Dew, because you've now, your mind's been expanded. Does it mean that we're forever expanding to fill the budget or fill kind of the space created with the new budgets or new tastes we've discovered?
Yeah, that exactly. I think you would always be expanding with the amount of whiskies that are appearing on the market, and there's new wood finishes, new cask finishes, new ages of whiskey, whatever coming out almost every week, certainly every month anyway. So I think you would naturally expand in that way. But I don't know. I genuinely do think if I was a multi-billionaire, I would still pick a really old faithful whiskey. I'm a creature of habit. I like what I like and I don't think I'd change.
So that's a question for our audience. Would you change your daily drinker if money was no object? Would you look at a whiskey that's right now maybe one of your top shelf 4 times a year drinks and say, I can now have that every day, and I'll replace that one up on the top shelf with something 10 times more expensive?
But if it was a limited edition and you knew that you would find it very hard to get your hands on another bottle of it, would you be so inclined to drink it? I think there's so many factors that come into consideration.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think Amy agrees with me. I think she agrees with the whatever you fancy on that day is what you'll drink. It's so
So
interesting.
it is interesting. And I think there's no right or wrong answer. I'm just very curious how people make their
Yeah.
decisions, and psychologically, what does it do? Because our brain states are changing with our, the when we experience and try new whiskeys, we're forever changed. It changes everything about how we choose the next whiskey. So here's a question we were talking about during the week. If money was no object, would you move on from a discussion or a consideration that often occurs, which is, if I have €1,000, do I buy 20 €50 bottles, or do I buy €1,000 bottle? If money was no object, would you still be thinking in terms of quantity and that linear multiplication kind of table?
I think I would go quality over quantity. One, because how would you ever in your lifetime drink that amount of whiskey? So
I
say
know.
for example, say we take the Maison or the Maison or the Method and Madness 33, €3,000. Would you rather have one €3,000, one 3 grand whiskey, or 100 of Powers Rye? But
Yeah,
I
I
couldn't
know.
drink 100 Powers Rye in my lifetime.
That's the question. That's the thing. You
So
see,
I think I would
well, now we're into the psychological battle between rational and irrational.
Yeah.
And we're not rational creatures. As humans, we make irrational decisions, but we tend to try and convince ourselves that we are rational. So I've seen people ask in our group, our community, is that whiskey worth 50 times more than that other whiskey? And the answer, of course, is always, well, it depends, like, no, on your metrics of taste alone.
Yeah.
But what are you deciding it on then is the next question. Like, what are your criteria?
Graham has made a fantastic point there. If an expensive whiskey was freely available every day, you would get bored of drinking it. That's so true. You couldn't be expected to drink the same high level whiskeys every single day if you became a multimillionaire, because why would you? You want variety. Variety is the spice of life. So I totally agree with that. Yeah, I totally agree. I genuinely think it's all mood based. Like right now, I was actually thinking earlier, whatever mood I'm in, I am craving a whiskey espresso martini. I haven't had one of those in months. Why is it in my head? I don't know. And that's what I'll probably have at some stage next week. So it completely depends on how you feel.
I know. Greg says, I'm now more inclined to have less bottles and go with the higher end pours. And then we see that trend a lot as people get more into whiskey, invest more into whiskey, spend more, put more of their discretionary income into it. It does become more about the few that you love rather than the greater amount that you're kind of okay with.
That was also something that shifted post-pandemic world as well. I think people were buying less spirits and alcohol just in general, but what they were buying was of higher quality. So that's, it's a trend that was very interesting actually post-COVID.
And Robert says a lot of these big heavy pot stills or older single malts are special moment whiskies. I feel drinking a bottle of Redbreast Dream Cask 32 over a space of a month is a waste in some regards. And I can see all sides of this. I think it's so individual, it's so subjective based on everyone's individual circumstances and budgets and psychological headspace where they are. Like I had a moment recently where it was a random Monday night and I bottle killed the Dream or the Bushmills 32-year-old. I just, you know what? I can't take it with me. There's a quarter of the bottle left. We're enjoying this tonight. That's the end of it. It doesn't have to be Friday or Saturday or a birthday or any other thing. So I can see all sides of it.
Robert, that's another fantastic point. He's hit the nail on the head there as well. When you're drinking really full-bodied whiskies all the time, it kind of takes a little bit, you need more time. Like I know when I'm drinking the likes of a Redbreast 27, I will sip that for a long time because it's such a complex whiskey. There's so much depth, there's so many layers. Whereas some nights, or if you're out in a bar, you want like a Bushmills 10-year, something really light that you can just sit back quite easily while you're with your friends and having the crack. So all really, really good points. It's such an interesting topic, isn't it?
It is. And I think it's a good hypothesis for us. Like if money is no object, like you said, it's a brand strategy kind of exercise to start thinking about. Here's another one. If money is no object, is there a distillery or experience you'd visit or you'd do? I'd be curious to get people's thoughts on this. And Lauren, it's a funny one for us because we kind of created the business because we wanted to do these amazing experiences and we wanted other people to do these amazing experiences because there are people out there who want to go deeper and want to go beyond the daily drinker or the daily tour and they want a distillery or an experience. Is there something that you still want to do in the world of Irish whiskey that you haven't done?
Oh my word. So for me personally, this is not necessarily Irish whiskey experiences related, and also it would be impossible to pull off with a group of people. Maybe not, you can tell me. I want to visit every single Irish distillery, and I know that's something that or brand home. I know not everyone is a distiller. That's something I really want to do, and I know I will tick it off eventually, but it takes a lot of time. Like some of these places are very far away from each other. In Ireland, as we mentioned before, we're not used to driving 5-6 hours to get somewhere, but I want to do it. And I think that's something that I would probably consistently do over maybe like a couple of months and just dedicate everything to doing that and nothing else. Just literally like the Bourbon Trail, but on a much bigger scale.
Like, why do I get the feeling that me and Anthony are going to be paying for this?
No, personal expense. Personal expense is just a little bucket list I have for myself that I want to visit every single distillery and brand home in Ireland.
Bill's dream is a pub crawl to all the great whiskey bars in Ireland's great cities. That's a great one.
I also wanted to do this. This was a suggestion I made in my previous career of doing a whiskey, like a trad trail along Ireland, which is also something that I think would be fascinating, and incorporating whiskey in there as well, like traditional music, great whiskey, Irish coffees, the works. Great one, Bill. Great one.
Richard's dream is Alex Thomas tasting at Bushmills, which is a dream for many people, and it can be organized, it can be done.
It can.
It is amazing. Like, we have to remind ourselves how lucky we are when we work in this industry, the people we meet. But I mentioned on previous live streams the starstruck how starstruck I was when I first met Billy Lighton, former master blender at Middleton, and how I could barely get words out. I was that in awe of this man whose name was on bottles of Redbreast, who'd been with the company 40 odd years, and it blew my mind that that was a living human, that you could be in the same room as him. And so I don't underestimate how much of a dream that can be for tastings like that. Yeah, it's amazing. That's a great dream, Richard.
Absolutely. And also, I was the same, as you know, with Ger Buckley, Middleton Master Cooper. Like, that man, oh my word, the wealth of knowledge and the passion, honestly just floored me. Same with John Teeling, the godfather of Irish whiskey. Like, listening to people like that, as you said, Barry, we do kind of have to pinch ourselves every now and then that we're very, very fortunate that we live and we work on this island and we get to meet these people. But there's still people out there that you meet, and they just captivate the room, the audience. You can hear a pin drop when they speak because people just let them talk. Oh, amazing.
Gillian says whiskey with Billy Lighton in the cottage would be an incredible experience. Absolutely. Yeah. And my, like, that one experience I had with Billy Lighton, I tell it 100 times, you're all sick of hearing it, but it was after an awards show in Dublin. And I went to a bar afterwards with a few friends from that awards show, a whiskey awards show, and I saw all of the Irish Distillers team in the corner of the bar, and there was Billy Lighton and a few others, and I was only new into my whiskey journey, and there was a woman sitting beside Billy Lighton, and she got up and left her chair, and I darted over and I jumped into the chair, and everyone was looking at me like, who's this fella? And I just said, hi, Billy, how you doing? My name is Barry. I'm a big fan, really into whiskey. And then the woman came back, and it was Billy's wife. And she said, that's my chair. I said, oh, I'm so sorry. And I went to get up. She goes, no, sit down there. She said, I sit next to him all the time. So I started talking to Billy. And as we're talking, they're all kind of a bit of a raised eyebrow, wondering who this fella is. The server came over and asked, would anybody like a drink? And Billy said, yeah, actually, we'll all have Redbreast 12s. And I nearly let out a whimper. I was like, I could have a Redbreast 12 with Billy.
Whiskey with Billy. Yeah. But it is, I actually think it's really nice though that, like, you get so, I don't know, these people are so humble, and you do have that kind of like little fangirl moment where you're kind of like, oh my word, like, I've learned and I've drank your whiskeys for years that you created and you were behind, and now you're beside me. They are like celebrities of the whiskey world, the Billy Lightons, the John Teelings, the Ger Buckleys. 100% they're celebrities in their own right.
But then you meet them and they just want to have the crack like anybody else does.
They're so humble, so humble. They just sit and have a pint and a whiskey with you, no bother. They're the most down-to-earth, humble people who want to do nothing but impart their knowledge and just widen the circle of Irish whiskey, which is unbelievable. We're very lucky, very lucky.
I remember the first time we had Brian Nation, former master distiller at Middleton, who moved over to Minneapolis to open O'Shaughnessy Distilling as master distiller. And we got him on an event, a lock-in event during COVID. And I had never met Brian before. I just, again, that kind of reverence for that title and his journey and his contribution to Middleton. And when he came on the lock-in, I was a bit nervous and didn't really, I thought I'd be a little bit tongue-tied. And Brian came on, and within 10 minutes, he said, do you want me to sing a song? And I thought, here we go. A session kicking off already.
Even myself the other week with Louise McGuan, like, listening to that woman and her journey, she's an absolute superstar. She really is, and what she's doing is incredible. And I know there's a lot of people who are very excited to spend a day with her as well. We're just so fortunate that we you're learning every day. You're meeting these people every day that inspire you in different ways. You learn different things. It's incredible.
So here's a question that I want to pose to you, Lauren, and I want to pose to the audience. And it's this: is there a point with whiskey of diminishing returns? And I don't put silent distillery bottles up there to focus on them alone, but I want to use them as a vehicle to discuss this very quickly. There are whiskies out there now that can cost 50,000 or more euros a bottle. Silent Distillery from Middleton are an example of this. And by most people's rational metric, they can't be 50 times better than €1,000 bottle or 100 times better than a €500 bottle. If you're saying, well, flavor that blows my mind or what have you. With these, it's obviously there's more at play irrationally than just is an X year whiskey worth that much? But I wonder, does the audience think that there's a point where you can't spend that much and drink the thing? Like at some point, that amount of money, you are buying a piece of art, you are buying an ornament, an heirloom, and something to put on your shelf for generations.
There's so many points to this question because we've spoken about all of these things before about where, you know, older whiskey doesn't necessarily mean that it's better. At what point do you know, can the whiskey really age for that long in the cask and you'll notice a huge difference versus a 20, 30-year-old whiskey? There's so much at play. And again, the fact that we do now have whiskies like this coming out of Ireland and coming out of Middleton that do play with the Scotch whiskies at the higher level, the Macallans of this world. And it's great that we have that. So there's so much to consider. But I think the one thing that comes up consistently is, for a 45-year-old whiskey, can it really take much more from the cask after 45 years? Is there a certain point where that kind of stops and doesn't become feasible anymore? I'm on the fence. I think it's great that we have these whiskies, and Johnny's just made a great point there. If you enjoy the whiskey, could there be a diminishing return? Yeah, this will be an interesting. What do you think?
I think it is wholly individualistic and subjective, and there are people out there, I've met them, who buy bottles of Silent Distillery to drink them, and they take great pride and they enjoy it, and they've made enough money that they can do it, and I respect it and I applaud it. Middleton Distillery gets visits from private jets where people turn up and they pick up a few Silent Distilleries and they bring them back home to where they're going and they'll drink them, and I think that's fine. So I think it is really individual.
Yep.
Really, really individual. Now, I've been lucky enough through a few tastings to taste different Silent Distilleries, and they are extraordinary whiskies, but for different reasons than the ones we've mentioned tonight even. So if I was being asked which is a better whiskey, I'd have to ask you, what are you allowing me the criteria to be? Is it pure flavor alone? Then I might say to you, do you know what? I'm going with Green Spot 26-year-old. If you're saying a piece of history, a time capsule, you're one of 20 people in history to have ever tasted this, and on and on and on, then I'm saying Silent Distillery. Yeah. So I think the criteria are important here. So it's almost like there's no wrong answer, but please tell me how I'm supposed to measure it.
Yeah, this goes back to the point where drinking a whiskey is more than just the liquid. I think you've just described that perfectly, and I think that's very much the case with these whiskies. Absolutely. Graham's made a great point, and I've said this so many times before. I am sometimes more than happy to just know that I've tasted a whiskey and I've either not been a fan of it or I've loved it. And if it's out of my budget or I don't want to spend that on a whiskey, so be it, as long as I've tasted it. I just think that's a great point to pull up there.
Some great points there from Bill as well. Like, I think the purchase of a special bottle has its own type of satisfaction, similar to tasting it, but also, are you convincing yourself that because of the high cost that it is better than it is? I mean, it's a great point. I mean, if you spend 50,000 on a bottle and you open it and you don't like it, you don't want anybody to know that you spent that much money on the bottle you don't like. So you're going to tell everyone how much you loved it.
Exactly.
Rick talking about exclusivity here and positioning here. Nearly every Ferrari you could drive will be an amazing experience, but driving Enzo Ferrari's personal car or on the streets of Modena, different than just driving a cool car. So that's the difference, isn't it?
It's all personal and it's all completely subjective, I think, is the answer, the overarching answer to all of these questions.
Yes,
I think,
I know. The awful, most hated answer of all, it depends.
It depends.
Now, saying that, if you would like to try a time capsule, a piece of Midleton history, we are opening 2 bottles of the 48-year-old Midleton Silent Distillery Chapter 4 in Ohio in 4.5 weeks' time, 5 weeks' time, in Cleveland and in Delaware, Ohio. So no different than us opening the 44-year-old Bushmills in Belfast in September. We're opening 2 48-year-old silent distilleries, and it's all for charity. We're raising money for charities in Ohio. And you can get details of that on storiesandsip.com, or just message me or Lauren, and either of us can send you the link to our events. We'd love to have you in Ohio. I'm going to be flying over with the master distiller from Midleton, Kevin O'Gorman. And we've got 4 events. One of them is completely sold out, 3 events, not yet. And it's going to be great. We're going to have a great time sampling Redbreast 27, Midleton Very Rare 2023, all the spot range, all the Redbreast range, and then these beauties as well, 48-year-old silent distillery. Poor Lauren can't make it.
Very sad I can't go to that. I'll be in the depths of Whiskey Bus 3 at that point, in final stages of everything.
She says that she'll be in the depths of a lock-in in Wexford at another whiskey festival, probably.
That's very true, actually. Yeah, 5 weeks away, I think it is. Yeah.
So what else can you buy if money's no object? And I think moving beyond whiskey bottles and dream drams, there's other things to turn your attention to. We all know that there's cask options out there where you can buy a cask of your own whiskey. And this is where, if money is no object, it can get very, very interesting, because there's a lot of distilleries out there today that want you to invest. They use the word invest. We'll put that in parentheses or quotation marks because it's not regulated. But they want you to buy a cask filled with new make spirit for 6,000 to 20,000 euros a bottle, cask, in the hope that it'll taste good and etc. And it's there to fund the distillery's growth and evolution. If money is no object, however, you don't need to wait for the whiskey to age. You can go and buy casks of already matured whiskey. You can knock on the door of Midleton Distillery and say, I have €1 million burning a hole in my pocket, and if I don't get it out of my pocket, my leg's going to catch fire. And they'll say, sir, may we direct you into this wonderful room over here, called the Midleton Cask Circle. And Lauren, we got to see this recently down in Midleton. And this is where you can be part of the most exclusive Irish whiskey club in the world, because you can get access to one of, I think there's only 12 members in it currently, 12 or 14 members currently in this club. And a member is somebody who owns a cask of fully matured Midleton stock, anywhere from 12 years old to 33, 34 years of age. Casks ranging from 60, 80,000 euros a cask, all the way up to 1.5 million or more for a cask. So if money's no object, give us a shout. We'd love to help you choose your cask in the Cask Circle, the most exclusive Irish whiskey club in the world.
Imagine dropping 1.5 million on a cask, on a barrel of whiskey. That is wild. Listen, if people can do it, fair play. There's a lot of distilleries obviously have cask programs, and a lot of them will work with you to select kind of the style of whiskey, the age of whiskey, the cask you want. Some weren't too bad. Like, some start at a reasonable enough value depending on the age you want it to be, and they'll work with you obviously on that. I think it's very interesting. And Barry, you've obviously dived a lot deeper into this in recent years with the Stories and Sips Club and your sourcing of casks for the club and how it works. And it is very, very interesting. It really is. There's no doubt about it. It's a great way if you want your own barrel and your own whiskey. It's entirely catered to you.
It's harder and harder to find age stock, and it's getting more and more expensive. So there are very few opportunities to buy barrels of aged whiskey individually. Very, very few out there. But again, if money's no object, that's an option for you.
Exactly.
Doug says if money was no object, he'd try and spend 2 months traveling Ireland, Scotland, England, and Wales, embracing the history and my love of whiskey, golf, and music. Great idea. Great idea.
Beautiful. Yeah.
You can also buy into a distillery. So we have people in our whiskey community that have bought into a distillery. They've become shareholders. There are investment schemes where new distilleries will seek investment to help fund their development. And we've got members of ours who've done that. And you've no guarantee of any return. Maybe in 10, 20, 30 years, if the distillery gets sold, you might get a return. But who knows? But it's something you could buy into.
Joe, if money was no object, I'd buy Diageo. That's fair. I wish I had Diageo's money, in fairness. Yes, I think the most recent investment in the group was a Hascraw, one of our visits on Whiskey Bus 3. I know we have a few investors in the club in that. It's another option, another way to get involved in the industry.
There's also whiskey companies that'll look for investment. So not just distilleries, but whiskey merchants and whiskey bonders who would love to get support and grow their dream, and they're looking for investment. So there's ways to do that. I've connected some people in the past together, people who wanted to get into the world of Irish whiskey and people in the world of Irish whiskey who wanted to get into some money, and you put the two of them together and things can happen. So it's there's ways to support the world of Irish whiskey too, if money's no object, and not just drink the stuff, but maybe help support it and grow it as well. Isn't near and dear to Lauren's heart.
Every whiskey bus, 5 whiskey buses a year, I'll join them all. Yes, no problem. This might be a dream of yours. If we could have a whiskey bus every month, we probably would. In fairness, I know that'd be an awful lot of work and a very tight schedule to work to, but it would be some crack. And I know a lot of people do mention that they would love to join, and we absolutely would, in all seriousness, love to see you in the future. If the stars align and timings align, absolutely.
David says a whiskey castle, a whiskey boat, a whiskey plane.
Absolutely, all branded.
We're working on at least one of those things.
We are. And keep the cards close to the chest for now. I would say the less details shared on that, the better. But let's just say what we have joked about before on live streams and in the group is being talked about. It's being talked about.
Johnny says, if somebody will pay me to drink whiskey, I promise to reinvest.
I know, imagine being paid to drink whiskey. What a job.
Now, your other option is you could do something like, if money is no object, you could build your own whiskey bar. Some people who love food build their own restaurants, and with varying levels of success, admittedly. Just because you like an omelette and your friends tell you make a great omelette doesn't mean you should open an omelette bar. But whiskey might be less of a risk depending on your audience. But if you like it so much, you might end up drinking it all, which in itself could be a bit of a challenge.
This is a dream of many, I think, in the whiskey world, the drinks industry, and wider sort of just spirits community, is to own your own bar. But it's not easy. It's really not easy. The stock management, the staff management, rates, everything. It's very tough, but when you get it right, you really reap the rewards of it. But you almost, I think, with a bar and a restaurant, even, you almost need to build a community around it, or else you just don't really have any traction at all. If you get your regulars, you create a club, maybe a whiskey club, a gin club, whatever it might be, that's when you start to see the success. But I would love to do this. I'm not telling anyone my name because I don't want anyone to steal it.
You already gave it to me and told me to do it.
No, I think you actually said, "Oh, I'm stealing this. I'll give you commission."
Well, the alternative is, instead of opening a whiskey bar, you could just open a whiskey room in your house, which, if money is no object, you don't need to leave the house. Invite your friends over. Richard wondering, where's this picture from? Just Google home whiskey bars. You'll find this probably on Google Images, to be honest, Richard, just as an example. There's another one here. But you could build your own whiskey bar and never leave the house, have it fully stocked, maybe a whiskey cellar. That's an option for you.
That image that's on the screen now really looks like Bert's Jazz Bar in Belfast. I actually thought that's what it was when you first showed it to me, but it's not. It looks very similar though. I'm
not sure where that one is now. I should have looked. There was a question here from Graham. Are Irish cask sales experiencing some of the same fraud issues that those that have occurred in Scotland? So Irish cask sales are very new because it's only in the last 5 years or 6 years, no, 10 years since Dingle came online that cask sales are even a thing in Ireland. Fraud is not something that has reared its head yet, but it is full of cowboys. The industry is full of cowboys, and before you listen to anybody telling you that you're guaranteed a return, let me tell you, you're not guaranteed a return of anything. And cask companies are oftentimes touting returns on investment based on 1 barrel of Macallan that was forgotten about, that was bought for 8,000 and then sold for 2 million or something ridiculous. That doesn't happen. Like, that does not, one cask out of 6 million a year that are distilled in Scotland or whatever it is, it just doesn't happen. Buyer beware. If it sounds too good to be true, it is too good to be true. It's not a regulated industry. There's no financial oversight or financial regulation around cask sales right now, which is a problem. It's self-governed in the UK, or about to be self-governed. And I suspect that a lot of the casks that are being sold are from distilleries that even themselves have not released their own whiskey. But you can slap the word Irish whiskey on the side of a barrel once it's 3 years of age, and a lot of the cask companies don't really care where it came from because they already got your money, and they're telling you that in 5-10 years time you'll get a return on it. I'd be asking a lot of questions like, how am I expected to get a return? I'm not allowed to sell alcohol. I don't have an alcohol license. What happens if there's 10,000 other people all trying to get rid of their barrels at the same time? And on and on and on. So I do have a YouTube video on our Stories and Sips channel. If you scroll back through our videos, you'll find one from about 2 years ago all about cask programs and my advice on it. And I don't ever mention individual companies or talk about them. I don't want to get into that, but just more general advice on caveat emptor, buyer beware. It's a shark infested water out there.
I think that's a good philosophy for life. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Was there not something recently, or maybe a few years ago in Scotland, where the barrel had leaked or something, and the people who had invested in it, or a person, they were like, well, we're sorry, there's a leak in the barrel, half of it's missing.
It's not unheard of. And also, for example, once a cask company sells you their cask, they don't really care what it tastes like after 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So my question would be, who's tasting it? Who's trying it?
Yep.
Who's evaluating that cask in 5 or 10 years time? Was it over oaked? Was it put into a bad barrel? Did it leak? How do you know? No one cares at that stage once the barrel has been sold. So anyway,
exactly.
Thanks to Doug there for a nice comment.
Yes, I saw that. I will never pass up an opportunity to go to New York. It's my favorite place in the world.
I like that Lauren interpreted that as getting a trip paid for to go to New York as opposed to a drink, which is in New York.
I will buy my own flights and my own hotel, and I will go my merry way to New York. Doug can do the buying of the drinks on that side. That's no problem. I will get myself there.
Thanks, Doug. That's very kind. We would love to take you up on that. Doesn't include travel, he says.
Don't worry. I didn't assume.
So, folks, that's our overview of If Money Was No Object. We had a bit of fun, a bit of crack thinking about it and talking about it, didn't we?
We did, yeah. It is just the most open-ended discussion of so many points and what you could do with it. And I honestly, as we've said before, it all boils down to preference. That's it. Whiskey in a nutshell. It's all about preference. Someone prefers a 5-year-old whiskey over a 35-year-old whiskey. You can't tell them they're wrong.
Folks, you've given us some things to think about as well, and great feedback, great input tonight. If you've just joined us, you can catch the replay as soon as we finish. You can watch this from the start. And Lauren is going to be traveling next week, so I will be hosting the Shebeen myself next week. Tough luck, everybody. We'll have half the numbers that we normally do because Lauren will be traveling, and we'll share our topic during the week. I'll probably choose some topic that Lauren wishes she could have been a part of. But she'll be missing out on it.
Please don't do that. Please don't do that. Also, there's a few comments, and I think it's rightly so. Amy's pub, her home pub, is the most stunningly gorgeous, perfect, beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life.
That's right.
Speaking about building home pubs, just a little shout out to her because it's absolutely gorgeous.
Great pub. Yeah, lots of great home pubs. Richard says, great time tonight. Really enjoy these discussions and chats and the teasing. That's all part of being Irish. And thanks for joining us and for tuning in. We are going to wrap up this evening. Just to let you know, if you are a member of our Stories and Sips Whiskey Club, which we'd love you to be, you want to dive deeper into Irish whiskey, we do have a Redbreast tasting with the master blender, newly appointed Dave McCabe from Middleton, who's going to host it with us. We're shipping out these kits next week. and they include samples of Redbreast 10-year-old, only available in the distillery in Middleton, Redbreast Cask Strength 12-year-old, and Redbreast Lustau edition. And Dave McCabe will lead us on a journey tasting those on February 20th. We've also got a event coming up on February 8th online with Jennifer Nickerson, who is the founding partner of Tipperary Boutique Distillery, and she's going to lead us through an amazing discussion on the economics of running a distillery, what it costs, why whiskey costs so much, where the money goes, where can more money come from, and it's going to be a great chat. And so I'm looking forward to that on February 8th. So hopefully that keeps you going, and I'll be back next week, and hopefully we'll see you guys in our Irish Whiskey Fans of America community and Facebook as well between now and then.
Absolutely. Very excited for the 8th of February. I think that'll be a great chat.
I think so too. Yeah. It really will.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. I really love I'm liking this theme of Shebeen, the discussion and things being put up for debate. I think it creates great conversation, a lot of points to think about and a lot of takeaways. So maybe we'll continue this.
I agree. We'll do more of it. And if you've got ideas for topics, things you want us to cover, let us know. Post it, email us, message us, post in our Facebook community, and we'll see it, tag us, and we'll take all your considerations, all your suggestions into consideration. So until next week, Sláinte.
Sláinte, everybody. Thank you for joining
us.